Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. In the peaceful suburb of Lakewood, Washington, Mark and Sarah Watson believed they'd found their dream home, a 2-acre retreat surrounded by towering trees and untouched by HOA rules. But their sanctuary turned into a battleground when a power-hungry HOA president sought control, igniting a clash of resilience and justice. The suburban neighborhood of Lakewood, Washington, was known for its serene environment, framed by rolling green hills and dense woodlands. Among the towering pines and ancient oaks stood a charming 2-story house on a spacious 2-acre plot, recently purchased by Mark Watson and his wife Sarah. Mark, a 39-year-old former engineer turned woodworker, had dreamed of owning a home where he could freely pursue his craft. After years of saving and searching, the couple finally found the perfect retreat. This property wasn't just another house. It was a haven of independence. The spacious lot was surrounded by trees, offering privacy and a sense of seclusion. Importantly, the property was outside the jurisdiction of the nearby Lakewood Park Homeowners Association, HOA, a detail that sealed the deal for the Watsons. Mark knew too well how restrictive such associations could be, often banning home-based businesses like his woodworking operation. Mark wasted no time making the place his own. The first project on his list was building a sturdy cedar workshop at the far end of the property. Nestled under the shade of towering pines, the workshop would become the heart of his business. He spent weeks designing it, ensuring the structure blended harmoniously with the natural surroundings. As soon as construction began, Mark felt a sense of pride and accomplishment that his old corporate job never gave him. To protect their newfound sanctuary, Mark installed a tall wooden fence with iron gates at the driveway's entrance. The couple envisioned a quiet, self-sufficient lifestyle, far removed from the prying eyes and unnecessary rules of an HOA. Sarah began planting a garden with vegetables and wildflowers, while Mark unpacked his tools and prepared to launch his woodworking business officially. For a while, everything seemed perfect. The Watsons settled into their new home with ease. Sarah often spent her mornings in the garden, while Mark immersed himself in crafting furniture and decorative pieces. The couple's evenings were filled with the comforting sounds of nature, a stark contrast to the noisy city they had left behind. They relished the freedom to make their own decisions without needing approval from anyone else. However, their peace didn't last long. About 2 months after moving in, a sleek white SUV pulled up to their gate on a sunny afternoon. Mark, wiping sawdust from his hands, walked over to see what was happening. A tall, middle-aged man in a tailored suit stepped out of the vehicle, his demeanor oozing authority. "Good afternoon," the man said, flashing a tight-lipped smile. "I'm Henry Collins, president of the Lakewood Park Homeowners Association. I wanted to discuss some concerns regarding your property." Mark's brow furrowed slightly as he opened the gate and extended a polite hand. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Collins. How can I help you?" Henry's eyes scanned the workshop behind Mark, his expression betraying disapproval. "I understand you've been making some modifications here. You may not realize it, but all properties in this area fall under the HOA's guidelines. That includes restrictions on exterior structures and, of course, business activities." Mark's polite smile faded. "I'm sorry, but that's not accurate. When we bought this house, we confirmed that our property isn't part of the HOA's jurisdiction. It's clearly stated in the deed." Henry's smile grew strained. "There may be some misunderstanding. Regardless, businesses are prohibited in residential areas governed by the HOA. I'd advise you to cease any such activities to avoid complications." Mark crossed his arms, his voice firm but calm. "With all due respect, Mr. Collins, my lawyer and real estate agent thoroughly reviewed this. My property is independent, and I have every right to run my business here." Henry's jaw tightened. "We'll see about that," he said, turning sharply and heading back to his SUV. Mark watched the vehicle disappear down the driveway, an uneasy feeling settling in his chest. He brushed it off, convincing himself it was a simple misunderstanding. But deep down, he knew this encounter was just the beginning of something far more troubling. The morning after Mark's tense encounter with Henry Collins, he found a letter in his mailbox. It was an official notice from the Lakewood Park HOA, bearing the association's emblem at the top and signed by none other than Collins himself. The letter alleged that Mark's workshop violated community aesthetic standards and that operating a business from his property was in breach of local regulations. It concluded with a warning: Failure to comply would result in fines and potential legal action. Mark folded the letter with a frown and showed it to Sarah over breakfast. "Didn't take him long to escalate," he said dryly. Sarah shook her head in disbelief. "They don't even have jurisdiction here. This is ridiculous." Determined to address the issue head-on, Mark responded with a formal letter of his own. He included copies of his property deed and legal documents that clearly stated his property was independent and not part of the HOA's jurisdiction. He sent the letter via certified mail, confident this would end the matter. It didn't. Over the next few weeks, more letters arrived, each more aggressive than the last. The tone shifted from warnings to outright threats, claiming that Mark's refusal to comply could lead to further consequences. One letter even included a grainy photo of his workshop, clearly taken from the street. The intrusion unsettled Sarah, who began to notice strangers loitering near their fence and snapping pictures. The final straw came one Saturday morning when Mark spotted a man in a gray hoodie walking along the edge of their property. The man appeared to be inspecting the workshop and jotting notes on a clipboard. Mark confronted him immediately. "Can I help you?" Mark asked, his voice firm. The man looked startled, muttered something about a routine inspection, and quickly walked away. Mark watched him go, anger simmering beneath the surface. He felt violated. Their privacy was being invaded, and their sanctuary no longer felt secure. Realizing this wasn't going to stop on its own, Mark decided to take legal action. He contacted an attorney who reviewed the situation and confirmed that the HOA had no legal grounds to enforce their rules on Mark's property. Together, they filed a motion for a restraining order against the HOA, specifically naming Henry Collins. The court ruled in Mark's favor, issuing a legal mandate that prohibited the HOA from taking any further actions against him or entering his property under any circumstances. With the restraining order in place, Mark felt a sense of relief. He installed a comprehensive security system, including cameras that covered every angle of the property, and added motion-activated lights along the perimeter. "If they come near us again, we'll have them on tape," he assured Sarah. But the Watsons' troubles were far from over. Late one evening, as Mark reviewed footage from the security cameras, he noticed a vehicle idling near the entrance to their driveway. It wasn't the first time he'd seen this. For several nights, the same car had been parked nearby, its headlights off, but the silhouette of a driver visible inside. Mark recorded the license plate and filed a report with the local police, but no immediate action was taken. The tension began to wear on Sarah. "What if they try to do something worse?" she asked one night, her voice trembling. "They won't," Mark said firmly, though he wasn't entirely sure. "The restraining order will hold them back, and if it doesn't, we'll be ready." Despite his assurances, the situation began to feel like a siege. Every letter, every shadow near the fence, every strange car was a reminder that the HOA wasn't backing down. Mark found himself checking the cameras obsessively, scanning for any sign of intrusion. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a quiet, moonless night when the serenity of the Watsons' home was shattered. Mark had just finished tidying up his workshop and was heading to bed when a sharp noise pierced the silence, a metallic clanging, followed by the faint creak of wood. Mark froze, his instincts kicking in. Quickly, he grabbed his phone and pulled up the live feed from the security cameras. What he saw made his blood run cold. 3 figures, their faces obscured by hooded sweatshirts, were climbing over the back fence. They carried tools, hammers, and what looked like cans of spray paint. Mark's workshop was their target. "Sarah, stay inside," he hissed as he grabbed his hunting rifle from the closet. It wasn't loaded with anything lethal. Mark was a firm believer in nonviolence, but the weapon was enough to make a statement. Slipping on his boots, he hurried downstairs, his heart pounding in his chest. As he stepped onto the front porch, he could see the intruders already at work. One of them was smashing a window of the workshop with a hammer, while another began spraying crude graffiti on the wall. The third stood watch, nervously glancing around. Mark raised the rifle and aimed it toward the night sky. The sharp crack of the gunshot split the air, echoing through the stillness. The reaction was immediate. The 3 figures froze, their heads snapping toward the porch. "Get off my property!" Mark roared, his voice carrying through the darkness. Panic set in. 2 of the intruders bolted toward the fence, scrambling to climb over in their haste to escape. The third, in his desperation, tripped over a garden bed and went down hard, clutching his leg with a cry of pain. Mark didn't hesitate. He leapt off the porch and approached the fallen man, his rifle pointed downward but ready. "Don't move," he commanded, his tone leaving no room for argument. The man groaned but complied, clearly unable to run. Mark quickly grabbed a length of rope from the workshop and tied the man's hands behind his back, ensuring he couldn't escape. Meanwhile, the motion-activated lights illuminated the yard, capturing everything on the cameras. The two fleeing intruders disappeared into the woods, but Mark had what he needed: footage of the break-in and one of the perpetrators in custody. "Sarah, call the police," he shouted, his voice sharp with adrenaline. Within minutes, the sound of sirens echoed through the neighborhood, and two patrol cars pulled into the driveway. The officers moved swiftly, assessing the situation and taking statements from Mark and Sarah. The tied-up intruder, a young man in his early 20s, looked terrified as the police hauled him to his feet. "You're making a mistake," he stammered. "I didn't want to do this. They made me." "Who made you?" one of the officers asked, her tone firm. The man hesitated, his eyes darting between the officer and Mark. Finally, he mumbled, "It was Henry. Henry Collins. He paid us to scare you. He said it would teach you a lesson." Mark clenched his jaw, his suspicion now confirmed. "I knew it," he muttered under his breath. The police retrieved the tools and spray paint cans left behind, carefully bagging them as evidence. The graffiti scrawled on the workshop wall, an ugly, bright red non-loser, stood as a stark reminder of the malice behind the act. The captured intruder was taken to the police station for questioning, while Mark handed over the security footage. "This will give you everything you need," he told the lead officer, showing her the high-definition video of the three men scaling the fence and vandalizing the property. Over the next few days, the police worked quickly. Using the footage and the testimony of the captured vandal, they identified and arrested the other two perpetrators. It didn't take long for them to crack under pressure, confirming that the entire operation had been orchestrated by Henry Collins. He had promised them money and protection, claiming he had the power to handle any fallout. But Henry had underestimated Mark's resolve and the thoroughness of the police. With 3 eyewitnesses willing to testify against him and clear evidence tying him to the crime, the case against Henry began to build rapidly. Mark and Sarah, though shaken, felt a new sense of determination. They repaired the damage to the workshop, cleaned off the graffiti, and doubled down on their security measures. Mark knew the battle wasn't over, but for the first time, he felt like the tide was turning in their favor. Little did Henry Collins know, his carefully constructed world of power and control was about to come crashing down. The arrest of Henry Collins sent shockwaves through the quiet neighborhood of Lakewood. For years, the president of the HOA had presented himself as a pillar of the community, a man dedicated to maintaining order and preserving property values. But now, his carefully curated image lay in tatters as Mark's legal actions and the police investigation uncovered the darker side of his reign. Following the confession of the captured vandals, Henry Collins was formally charged with multiple crimes, including conspiracy to commit vandalism, incitement, and violation of the restraining order issued by the court. When the police arrived at his home with a warrant, neighbors watched in stunned silence as Henry was escorted to a patrol car. The HOA president, once untouchable, was now the subject of public disgrace. Mark worked closely with his lawyer, providing all the evidence he had meticulously gathered. The security footage showing the vandals scaling the fence, damaging the workshop, and spraying graffiti became the centerpiece of the prosecution's case. Additionally, the testimony of the 3 vandals painted a damning picture of Henry's involvement. They revealed details of secret meetings where Henry promised them cash payments and assured them that any trouble with the law would be taken care of. "He told us to make it loud and clear," one of the vandals admitted in court. The goal was to intimidate Mr. Watson and send a message. Mark's lawyer was relentless in presenting the evidence. She highlighted how Henry's actions weren't just a personal vendetta, but an abuse of power that undermined the very community he claimed to protect. The local media quickly caught wind of the case. News outlets ran stories with headlines like, "HOA president accused of orchestrating vandalism," and "Community leader faces criminal charges in shocking plot against neighbor." As the details of Henry's misdeeds surfaced, other residents of the HOA began to come forward with their own grievances. One elderly couple revealed that Henry had fined them thousands of dollars for minor infractions, such as planting non-regulation flowers in their front yard. Another family shared how they were threatened with legal action for leaving holiday decorations up too long. The stories painted a picture of a man who had used his position not to serve the community, but to exert control and enrich himself. The trial was a high-stakes affair, with both sides presenting their arguments in a packed courtroom. Henry's defense team attempted to downplay his role, suggesting that he was unaware of the vandals' actions and had been falsely implicated. But the evidence was overwhelming. Mark took the stand, delivering a composed yet powerful testimony about the events that had unfolded. He described the fear and frustration of being harassed, the violation of his property, and the impact on his family's sense of safety. "All we wanted was to live peacefully and pursue our dreams," he told the court. "Instead, we were targeted simply because we refused to bow to unwarranted authority." The vandals, now serving reduced sentences in exchange for their cooperation, testified as well. They corroborated Mark's story and provided further details about Henry's manipulation and orders. The prosecution also presented financial records that hinted at other potential misconduct by Henry, including misappropriation of HOA funds. These revelations further damaged his credibility and left little room for doubt about his guilt. After weeks of deliberation, the jury delivered its verdict. Henry Collins was found guilty on multiple charges, including conspiracy, harassment, and violation of the restraining order. The judge handed down a sentence that included probation, community service, and a substantial fine. Most importantly for Mark, the court ruled that Henry was personally liable for the damages to the workshop, ordering him to pay restitution. The ruling triggered a cascade of changes within the HOA. Henry was immediately removed from his position as president, and the remaining board members were forced to step down amid allegations of complicity and negligence. A special election was held to form a new board, which promised greater transparency and accountability. The legal battle, though grueling, marked a turning point for Mark and Sarah. They had stood their ground against a powerful opponent and prevailed. Their victory wasn't just personal. It was a statement to the entire community that abuse of power would not go unchallenged. As Henry faced the wreckage of his reputation and financial stability, Mark and Sarah felt a renewed sense of hope. Their fight wasn't just about protecting their home. It was about standing up for the principles of fairness and justice. For Mark, the scars left by the experience were real, but so was the satisfaction of knowing he had seen it through to the end. The workshop, once defiled by hatred, now stood as a symbol of resilience, a reminder that even in the face of intimidation, the truth and determination could prevail. The courtroom victory marked the beginning of a new chapter for Mark and Sarah. With the legal battle behind them, the couple could finally focus on rebuilding their lives and restoring their sense of peace. For the first time in months, their home felt like the sanctuary it was meant to be. Mark wasted no time repairing the damage to his workshop. He worked tirelessly to remove the graffiti, replace broken windows, and restore the space to its former glory. The act of rebuilding was cathartic, a way of reclaiming what had been taken from him. Soon the workshop looked better than ever, and Mark was back to creating his custom woodwork, fulfilling orders from clients who had eagerly awaited his return. The community, inspired by Mark's determination and integrity, began to rally around him. Neighbors who had been too intimidated to speak out under Henry Collins's regime now approached Mark with words of support. Some even commissioned furniture from him, seeing his work as a testament to resilience and craftsmanship. Meanwhile, the HOA underwent a complete overhaul. The new board members, elected in the wake of the scandal, sought to repair the association's damaged reputation. They publicly apologized to Mark and Sarah, formally acknowledging that their property was independent and exempt from HOA oversight. The new leadership also introduced reforms, including mandatory transparency in decision-making and limits on the board's power. Henry Collins, once the self-proclaimed guardian of the community, faced the full consequences of his actions. Stripped of his title and burdened with fines and restitution payments, he was forced to sell his home to cover his debts. As he left the neighborhood in disgrace, Mark couldn't help but feel a sense of justice. Though the ordeal had been exhausting, Mark found solace in knowing he had stood his ground. The restraining order against the HOA remained in place, but it was no longer a source of tension. The new board members respected the boundaries and focused on rebuilding trust with the residents. For Mark and Sarah, life finally returned to normal. The workshop, once a target of malice, now stood as a symbol of victory and independence. Mark's business flourished, with his reputation spreading beyond the neighborhood. The couple often reflected on how close they had come to losing their dream, but the experience only strengthened their resolve. Their victory wasn't just about winning a legal battle. It was about proving that persistence and a commitment to justice could triumph over even the most entrenched opposition. The scars of the conflict would remain, but so would the satisfaction of knowing they had fought for what was right and won. In the months that followed the courtroom verdict, the Watsons' lives returned to a semblance of normalcy. The dust from the legal battle had settled, but its ripple effects were felt far beyond their property. Mark and Sarah's stand against the abuse of power resonated with the community, sparking a movement for change. The new HOA board, determined to learn from the scandal, implemented sweeping reforms. Annual audits became mandatory. Board meetings were open to all residents, and decisions were required to be fully documented and justified. These changes fostered an environment of transparency and accountability, helping rebuild trust among the neighbors. Mark's story didn't just inspire his local community, it reached a wider audience. News outlets covering the trial highlighted his perseverance, turning him into an unexpected advocate for property owners' rights. Mark and Sarah were invited to speak at town halls and homeowners' workshops, sharing their experience to help others facing similar battles. Though public speaking wasn't their forte, they embraced the opportunity to make a difference. The couple's property became a symbol of independence and resilience. Mark's restored workshop attracted new clients, many of whom admired the craftsmanship that had survived such adversity. His business flourished, and he even began offering woodworking classes, teaching others the joy of creating with their hands. Perhaps the most satisfying development was the sense of harmony that returned to their home. The once menacing presence of Henry Collins was now a distant memory. His disgrace had left him unable to hold any leadership positions, and his attempts to restart his life elsewhere were overshadowed by his tarnished reputation. The Watsons' victory also prompted changes at the state level. Their case caught the attention of lawmakers who introduced legislation to curb the overreach of HOAs. Dubbed the Watson Act by the media, the law set clear limits on HOA authority, ensuring that property owners couldn't be harassed or bullied under the guise of community governance. For Mark and Sarah, the fight had been long and exhausting, but it was worth every moment. Their dream of a peaceful life in their home had been threatened, yet they had emerged stronger, proving that justice and determination could prevail even against formidable odds. On quiet evenings, as Mark worked in his thriving workshop and Sarah tended to their flourishing garden, they often reflected on their journey. The scars left by the conflict were a reminder of the challenges they had faced, but they also served as a testament to their resilience. Together, they had turned their property into not just a home, but a lasting symbol of what it meant to stand up for what was right.